Something just shifted in the atmosphere over the eastern half of this country, and almost nobody is connecting the dots. The pattern that was driving summer weather a couple of weeks ago, the kind of normal in and out rhythm where storms move through, the air clears, the temperature recovers, the cycle resets, that pattern is gone. It has been replaced by something locked, stagnant, and stacked. A massive ridge of high pressure parked over the east, refusing to move. A heat dome the National Weather Service has openly called potentially historic. A ring of violent thunderstorms firing off the dome's edges and training hour after hour over the same towns. Flash floods overwhelming entire counties, prompting states of emergency, with more rounds expected to fall on ground that is already full. Severe storm corridors shifting north into communities less prepared to handle them. A tornado season that was supposed to be winding down, still producing deadly EF3 events. And underneath all of it, an El Niño tightening its grip on the larger atmospheric setup, telling forecasters this pattern is not a one-week anomaly. It is the new baseline. The eastern United States did not just have a bad week, it took a turn. The atmosphere reorganized itself into something more dangerous than what it was, and that reorganization is going to define the rest of the summer. So today I want to walk you through exactly what changed, why it changed, who is most exposed, and what you need to do before the next round of this pattern lands on top of you. Let's get into it. I know how this sounds. Every summer the news tells you the weather is dangerous, heat is dangerous, storms are dangerous, floods are dangerous. The volume gets turned up to 10 and stays there until you stop listening. So let me be precise about why I am using the word turn, because it is not a word I am throwing in for drama. A turn is a real meteorological concept. It is the moment a weather pattern shifts from one type of regime into another. The way the atmosphere moves changes. The way storms develop changes. The way heat builds and breaks changes. And the East just took exactly that kind of turn. The signature of the old pattern was movement. Storms came in, dumped their rain, and kept going. Heat built, then a front swept it out, then the cycle reset. The signature of the new pattern is stagnation. The ridge does not move. The storms cannot pass through it, so they ride around its edge over and over. The heat does not break. It accumulates. The rain falls on the same ground until that ground stops absorbing it. That is the turn. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let me walk you through the 5 major hazards that the new pattern is producing across the eastern half of the country right now, because they are not 5 separate problems. They are 5 faces of the same atmospheric reorganization, and they are stacking on top of each other in ways that almost no normal summer pattern produces. The first hazard is the heat itself, and this is the part most people have already heard about. 200 million Americans now sit under a sprawling dome of high pressure stretching from the Midwest to the East Coast to the Gulf. Forecasters are using the word historic. Daily record highs are being threatened in dozens of cities. Heat indices are projected to push past 110, possibly 115. In eastern Virginia, the Weather Service is openly comparing this event to the deadliest heat wave the region has seen in over a decade. Cities are forecasting overnight lows that will not drop below the upper 70s and low 80s, the same range that flirts with the all-time warm overnight low records of major cities. And the human body, which depends on the overnight recovery period to survive a multi-day event, is the one that absorbs that cost. The daytime high makes the headlines. The overnight low fills the hospitals. The second hazard is the ring of fire pattern, and this is the one almost nobody outside professional meteorology is connecting to the heat. The same heat dome that suppresses storms in its center forces storms to form on its edges, where the atmosphere is most unstable. Forecasters call this the ring of fire, a circle of thunderstorm clusters drifting around the dome's perimeter, sometimes a swath of storms thousands of miles long. The dome's clockwise circulation pushes those storm clusters around the rim, and every time the rotation puts a storm over the same county, the same creek, the same neighborhood, the rain falls on top of the rain that already fell. Forecasters call this training. It is the single most dangerous rainfall setup there is, and it is exactly what just happened across parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, southern Indiana, and northwest North Carolina, where rainfall totals of 2.5 to 8 inches in a few hours produced multiple flash flood emergencies, water rescues, and state of emergency declarations in 9 counties or more. The Ring of Fire is not a one-time event. It is the structural consequence of the dome being parked, and it keeps firing as long as the dome holds. The third hazard is what comes next, the next round of rain, because the ground that just took those record rainfall totals is no longer soft, absorbent soil. It is saturated. It acts like pavement. Any new rain that falls on it does not soak in. It runs off instantly into rivers that are already running high and into creeks that are already full. So the next round of 1 to 3 inches of rain falling on saturated ground beneath the same heat dome that is not moving produces more flooding than the first round did. The threat is not winding down. It is reloading. And the people who forecast this for a living are warning, in plain language, that the next round is likely to land harder than the last one. The fourth hazard is the severe weather corridor shifting north. In a normal summer, the classic severe weather alley quiets down by late June as the spring storm pattern winds down. That is not what is happening this year. As the ridge locks in across the southeast, the storm energy is being shunted along the northern and western edges of the dome, firing severe thunderstorm complexes across the northern plains, the Midwest, the upper Great Lakes, and into parts of the Northeast. Some of these complexes are intense enough that forecasters are explicitly warning about derecho potential, a long-tracking organized line of damaging winds that can blow down trees and power infrastructure across hundreds of miles in a single event. And this is happening on top of an active tornado season that is still producing deadly events as far east as Illinois, where a recent EF3 tornado with 140-mile-per-hour winds tore through a small town. The severe weather is not done. It is shifting into regions that statistically are less prepared, and on a calendar where most people think the worst is behind them. The fifth hazard is the longer-term setup, the engine behind all of it, and this is the one that turns this from a bad week into a defining season: El Niño. The Pacific warm pool is no longer a forecast, it is a measurement. It is building, and the major forecast centers now treat its presence as a near certainty, with the odds of it strengthening into a strong, very strong, or even historic event continuing to climb. That matters because El Niño is the single biggest reason this pattern keeps reinforcing instead of breaking down. It influences the jet stream, the placement of the ridge, the moisture available to the atmosphere, and the broader rhythm of storms across North America. The reason the dome is stuck, the reason the storms ride the rim, the reason the flooding reloads, the reason the heat does not break, is that the larger atmospheric setup is being reorganized in real time by a Pacific Ocean that has stopped behaving the way it did a few months ago. And the worst of that influence is not even here yet. The biggest impacts of a strengthening El Niño typically show up later in the year, which means this dangerous turn is the opening chapter, not the climax. Now let me get specific about who is sitting in the path of all of this, because the eastern half of the country is not one uniform place, and the turn lands differently depending on where you are: the Ohio Valley, the Mid-South, and the Appalachian foothills. Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, northwest North Carolina, and southern Virginia. This is the corridor that has taken the worst of the flash flooding and is still sitting under the dome's most active rim. The ground is loaded, the rivers are up, the next round arrives on land that has no capacity left to absorb it. If you live anywhere in this corridor, this is your week to be on the highest level of alert. The I-95 corridor and the urban Northeast, Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, Boston. This is where the heat is most dangerous to human life, where the urban heat island effect drives overnight, lows up into the territory that kills the elderly and the medically vulnerable, and where the older housing stock and unreliable cooling infrastructure leaves entire populations exposed. And it is where the ring of fire occasionally throws a severe thunderstorm or microburst against a power grid that is already strained by record demand. Heat plus storm plus aging infrastructure is the recipe for the kind of cascading event that disrupts millions in a single afternoon. The Midwest and Great Lakes, Chicago, Detroit, Indianapolis, St. Louis, Minneapolis. These are the cities currently caught between the strengthening dome to the southeast and the active severe weather corridor along its northern rim. They get the heat, they get the storms, they get the wind, and on the worst days of this pattern, they get all three in the same 48-hour window, with derecho potential as the most dangerous outcome. The Southeast and the Gulf Coast, Atlanta, Birmingham, Nashville, Charlotte, Raleigh, and the Florida Peninsula. The dome is centered closest to this region, which means the heat is most intense, the humidity is most stifling, and the storms that fire along the western and southern rim are slow-moving downpour producers. Florida, in particular, faces afternoon thunderstorm complexes that drift westward across the peninsula as the sea breezes collide, with locally heavy rainfall and lightning that is more aggressive than a typical summer day. And the broader interior, anywhere east of the Rockies. The pattern is large enough that the impacts radiate well beyond any one bullseye. If you live in a flood-prone area, a wildfire-prone area in the western flank of this same atmospheric setup, or a region that has been touched by tropical remnants before, you are part of the same system, and you should be reading it the same way. So here is your practical action list, because a 5-hazard pattern is useless to recite if it does not translate into things you can actually do. Pre-cool your home and pre-hydrate your body now, before the next peak of heat lands. Run the air conditioning hard to drop your home's baseline temperature. Hydrate aggressively before you feel thirsty, because by the time thirst registers, you are already behind. Know your cooling refuge. The nearest cooling center, library, mall, or air-conditioned relative's home. Find it on a calm afternoon, not in the middle of a 100-degree one. Watch the excessive rainfall outlook every single morning. This is the single most underused forecast product in American weather, and during a stuck pattern like this one, it is your direct line to whether your specific area is in the bullseye for flash flooding today. When a slight, moderate, or high risk is posted for your location, treat that day with respect. Know your low water crossings, know your alternate routes, and if you encounter water across a road, turn around, do not drown. There are no exceptions to that rule. If you live in the northern severe weather corridor, treat this as an active severe weather period, not a winding down one. Make sure wireless emergency alerts are enabled on your phone and that the volume is loud enough to wake you. Know where you shelter from a tornado. Get a NOAA weather radio if you can. Talk through your shelter plan with everyone in your household before the next round arrives, because the time to plan is not while sirens are sounding. Check on the vulnerable. I say this in every video, and I will keep saying it because it is the single most important thing any of us can do during an event like this one. Heat, storms, and flooding all kill the elderly, the isolated, and the chronically ill in disproportionate numbers quietly in their homes, often during the overnight hours when no one is watching. Knock on a door, bring water, make sure their cooling is working. A wellness check during a stuck pattern like this one can be the difference between someone surviving and not. And update your alerts. Make sure your phone is set up to receive wireless emergency alerts at full volume. Have the National Weather Service or the National Hurricane Center bookmarked. Know the difference between a watch, a warning, and an emergency. That distinction sounds basic, and it is the single most life-saving piece of weather literacy almost nobody bothers to lock in. Here is the honest summary of where we stand. The atmosphere over the eastern half of the United States just shifted from a normal in-and-out summer pattern into a stuck, stagnant, multi-hazard regime that is producing heat, severe storms, flash flooding, and the early flexing of an El Niño amplified, larger pattern at the same time. The dome is parked, the ring is firing, the ground is saturated, the severe weather corridor is shifting into communities that did not expect it. And the engine driving the whole reorganization is just getting started, with the biggest influence of a strengthening El Niño still ahead. This is not one bad week, this is a turn, and the people forecasting this for a living are not hedging about what it means anymore. So know which of these hazards lives in your zip code. Pre-cool, pre-hydrate, and know your cooling refuge. Watch the rainfall outlook every morning. Take severe weather seriously, even if you do not think it is your season. Check on the people who cannot fight this alone. And do not wait for the first warning to find out whether your alerts are working, your plan is in place, or your route to shelter is clear. The eastern U.S. took a dangerous turn, and the atmosphere is not turning back. I will be tracking every shift in this pattern, and I will bring you the next update the moment it sharpens. Until then, stay safe, stay prepared, and never ever let your guard down.